guys, today we're going to be making the Jacaranda square for our Vibrant Vintage Crochet Along reboot for 2018. So this crochet along, this is the third square, and this is the Jacaranda square, and I'm going to be using Shape Just Soft Fun in color 2618, just because I know someone will ask, and this is a 4.5mm hook, and this is about DK weight yarn, and it's center pull, so I'm just gonna go ahead and pull myself some here and get started. So for round 1, I need to make a slip knot. You can begin with a magic ring or however you prefer, and I'm gonna chain 3. You can chain 4 if it makes it easier for you. I'm going to slip stitch in the first chain to make a ring. And in my ring, I'm going to work my round 1, which is going to be a beginning DC and 11 double crochets. So beginning DC is going to be, I didn't quite get in the center there. There we go, my center. Okay, I'm going to single crochet, chain 1 for my beginning DC, and then I'm just going to make 11 more double crochets to get my center circle. All right, so now we've got our beginning DC and our 11 more doubles to make our center circle. I'm gonna go ahead and pull my tail because I was working over it, so now my center is closed. Okay, and then I'm going to join my round. All right, so when you join the round, make sure you pick up the back loop of your chain from your beginning DC and this leading loop right here. So make sure you get both loops of the chain and just leave the front loop alone. Make sure when you get your slip stitch, you get both loops. Okay, so now we're joining with a slip stitch. And don't tighten up that slip stitch. Oop. How did I do that with the tail, y'all? Okay, so slip stitch with your working yarn, not with your tail. All right, so now I've got my round joined, and for round 2, I'm going to start in the next stitch, and I'm going to work over my tail here with a beginning 2DC cluster, which looks like beginning DC, and I'm working in the next stitch, by the way, not in the stitch where you join. Work in the next stitch, just makes it look neater, in my opinion. So beginning DC and a DC in the same stitch, and that's how you get your beginning 2DC cluster. And when you come back around to join, you're going to join in that DC and just ignore this beginning DC here. So the DC is the top of the stitch for the beginning 2DC cluster. All right, so we're just going to make a beginning 2DC cluster and then chain 2 and make a 2DC cluster working over our yarn tail in the next stitch. And that's our repeat. So we're just going to chain 2, 2DC cluster in the next stitch, all the way around. Here I've got my 2 chains on my hook now, and I worked over my tail enough to where I can trim it. Now I'm going to join my second round, and when I do this, I'm going to pick up these 2 front bars of my double crochet and make my slip stitch. All right, and that makes it look just like one of the other clusters. Okay, so now round 3. So for round 3, we're going to jump right into this chain space with another beginning 2DC cluster. So I'm going to make a beginning DC, DC, and that's my beginning 2DC cluster. Chain 2, and make another 2DC cluster in the same chain space. All right, and now I'm just going to keep on chaining 2 and make my 2DC cluster, chain 2, 2DC cluster. All right, so that's how we're going to look as we go around. That's our repeat. Chain 2, 2DC cluster, chain 2, 2DC cluster in the same space as before. So to finish up round 3, I've got my chain 2 on my hook here, and I'm going to join in the top of my beginning 2DC cluster. So I'm just going to go through that DC portion and slip stitch. All right, so for the next round, round 4, we are going to go ahead and square off our motif. So to do that, I need to start with a single crochet, 2 of them in this first chain space, 2 singles, and then 3 singles in the next chain space. Okay, and then 2 in the next one. All right, then we'll make 2 doubles in our next chain space. Now we are to our corner. So in the corner, we're going to make trebles, 2 trebles. Now, when you make a treble, if you are like this out here, okay, and they're all loosey-goosey spread out here, and you try to go in to make your treble, I've heard people say they don't even ever use treble crochet because they feel like it's too loose and they can't do it properly. So here's how to make a treble crochet real quick. You're going to go ahead and wrap twice, but choke up on it. Make it real right next to the beginning of your hook there. So it's real small. And don't worry because you don't need much. So get it all gathered up at the beginning there, then yarn over. Then insert your hook. Yarn over, and now you're still kind of tight there. You got to keep everything nice and snug. Go ahead and pull through your 2 loops. I went in the same space. All right, so let's try that again. Choke up in the next chain space. Thank you. For your corner. So keep it nice and snug. Not all tight, but just snug so that you're not loosey-goosey. Then whenever you yarn over and pull through the next 2 loops, what I've seen people complain about is that they have a huge gap at this point. So this loop will be like over here, a big gap. So you don't want that. So you have to start out with a nice tight wraps in the beginning. And then whenever you yarn over and pull through, now you don't have a gigantic treble. It's just normal size. So we're going to make another treble in there. Go ahead and get it nice and snug. Insert the hook. There you go. Oops. All right, so there we go. Now we've got 2 trebles. Now we're going to chain 3. Okay, and then 2 more trebles in the same chain space to get our corner. Okay, that's our corner there. I'm back at the beginning of my round. I've got my last DC on the hook now, and I'm going to join in the first single of the round with a slip stitch. Okay. And our next round is going to incorporate more of the 2DC clusters. So let's get started here. I guess on the next stitch, we're going to slip 1. I was trying to make sure I had my space there. So since we started in this stitch, I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch in 1 stitch there because our next round needs to start in this, the first of the 3 singles that are in the middle, in the center. So you remember you have 3 single crochets in 1 stitch in the center there. So your first cluster, your beginning 2DC cluster needs to start in that first single of those 3. So, so slip stitch, and then you're in the right spot there for the next stitch to be your beginning 2DC cluster. So we're gonna make a beginning DC, and then a DC in the same stitch for our beginning 2DC cluster, and then we're just going to chain 1 and skip 1 and 2DC cluster. Okay, and all the way to the end, chain 1, skip 1, 2DC cluster, chain 1, skip 1, 2DC cluster. Okay, and when we get to the corner, just chain 1. So we've got our clusters set up here, and now we're going to work 2DC cluster, chain 3, 2DC cluster in the corner, and then chain 1. And now we're going to work across, beginning with this treble here. So we've got to work our 2DC cluster in there first, and then we'll do chain 1, skip 1, 2DC cluster, all the way across to the corner. Then 2DC cluster, chain 3, 2DC cluster in the corner. And that's going to be our repeat around. And when we get to this last corner, we're going to make our corner, and then beginning with this treble again, make our first 2DC cluster, chain 1, skip 1, 2DC cluster, chain 1, skip 1, 2DC cluster, and I'll see you guys when I'm back at the beginning. So I've reached the beginning of my round here. I've got my chain 1 on the hook right now, and I'm going to join with a slip stitch in the top of my DC from my beginning 2DC cluster. There we go. And now we're going to go ahead and start with the end, the final round. So this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, the 6th round, right? In the first chain space, we're just going to make 1 single crochet because that is our center chain space on the side, and that only gets 1 single. Now all of these next 1, 2, 3, 4 chain spaces are going to get 2 single crochets each. 5 single crochets in the corner. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now we're going to make in the next 4 chain spaces 2 single crochets each. Okay, 2 single crochets in the next 1, 2, 3, 4 chain spaces. Now we're at our center chain space, so this chain space just gets 1. Okay, in the next 4 chain spaces, 2 singles each. Really, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're at our corner again, so 5 singles. All right, so I'm going to work that way all the way around until I get to the first single crochet that we made. Okay, so now I'm at the end of my round here, and I'm just going to join with a slip stitch in my first single. Pull my tail along. I always kind of pull it to the left there, and that's just to keep that slip stitch in its right positioning. Okay. Go into the stitch to the left, front, back to front, the stitch to the left of the joining, back to front, yarn over, pull your tail to the back, and back to front through the back loop only of the stitch to the right of the joining stitch. Grab a tail, pull it to the back. Make sure everything's situated, and then just start burying that tail. Back to front through back loops only of each subsequent stitch. All right, so that is the conclusion of the Jacaranda square. I really like this one because I'm a huge fan of clusters. So I hope you guys enjoyed this square, and you can use it for any project, but we're using it for the Vvcal Reboot 2018 Square 3. All right, so I will see you guys for the next Vvcal square, and happy crafting. Bye, guys.